problems. And I'm really very happy to see over the last 40 years the emerging support for veganism. You know, I remember back in 1980, everybody asked, what's a vegan? Oh, is that from the planet Vega? We don't know. You know, so nobody even knew what it was. But now look at this movement. It's one of the fastest growing movements on the planet. Not growing fast enough, but it is growing, and we have to continue to encourage that. And the other is we have to adapt an understanding of biocentrism, which is this understanding that we're not dominant on this planet, we're not superior on this planet. We are equal citizens on this planet. In fact, there's many species probably more worthy of that than us because they're keeping everything running. But we have to learn to live in harmony with all other species. And if we don't, we simply are not going to survive. There's no room on this planet. There's no room on this planet for 8 billion meat-eating, fish-eating hominids. It's unnatural. And all of those people who say, well, it's natural for us to eat meat. No, it was never natural to have 8 billion meat-eating hominids. And in fact, they'd say, well, we're carnivores. No, you're not. You're necrovores. Yeah. You don't eat meat. Lions eat meat. You eat dead bodies. That's what a necrovore is. So instead of comparing yourself to the lion and the tiger, compare yourself more to the buzzard and to the jackal. That's what we're carrion eaters. And some of the meat that people eat has been dead for a year, and people don't really give that much thought when they eat. So you know, we have to learn to live in harmony, and the best way to do that is by adapting a vegan lifestyle. That's the only way we're going to actually survive. The United Nations understands that. The Pentagon understands that because they see that the greatest threat to national security is climate change and the fact that of overconsumption of resources. They see that. The insurance companies certainly see that, but unfortunately, politicians don't. Well, then they don't see much anyway. But we can make a difference, and we are making a difference, and that gives me a lot of hope. You know, somebody says, well, you know, the problems are so overwhelming, it's impossible to solve them. Well, the only way to solve an impossible problem is to find the impossible solution. And that can be found. It can be found through passion, courage, and imagination. 1972, the very idea that Nelson Mandela would be president of South Africa was unthinkable and impossible. And yet that impossibility became a possibility. And we can do that with each and every movement. If you work for it, if you have the passion for it, you can make it happen. Now, I learned a lesson many years ago which has stayed with me all of my life. Back in 1973, I was a volunteer medic for the American Indian Movement during the occupation of Wounded Knee. And I went to Russell Means, the leader of the AIM there, and I said, we don't have any hope of winning here. We got 3,000 federal officers shooting at us. They killed 2 people, they wounded 46. We have no way of winning. So why are we here? And he said something to me that stayed with me forever. He said, we're not here because we're worried about the odds against us. We're not here because we're worried about winning or losing. We're here because this is the right place to be, the right time to do it, and the right thing to do. And don't worry about the future. Concentrate and focus on the present. What you do in the present will define what the future is. We have no power over the future. We have absolute power over the present. So that kind of approach, I think, makes, so we don't need to be depressed. There's no reason to be pessimistic. Just concentrate on doing everything you can in the present to solve those problems. And that can be done, again, by the combination of passion, imagination, and courage. And never let anybody deter you and tell you, oh, you can't do it, or it's impossible to do it. You have the power to do it. One person can make that kind of difference. Because of David Wingate, who's an activist in Bermuda, the Bermuda Storm Petrel did not go extinct. Because of Diane Fossey, the mountain gorillas survived. That shows you the power that one person can do. And I can't think of a greater legacy than because you intervened, because you acted, the species didn't go extinct, our habitat wasn't destroyed. We all have that power, and we should never, ever delegate it to these people who call ourselves our leaders, because the only thing they're interested in getting reelected and getting paid. So the power lies with us. And again, it's with the big organizations that you know, don't depend upon them. Depend upon yourselves and each other, and we can win and prevail. Thank you.
It's a hard act for anyone to follow Captain Paul Watson, but we have Ryuji Chua next. He's an animal activist and filmmaker who seeks to connect humans with other animals by telling stories on social media. And you probably saw that most recently he was a guest on The Daily Show, which went viral. So Ryuji on The Daily Show argued that animals have greater mental and emotional depth than humans assume, and he discussed his new documentary called How Conscious Can a Fish Be? So welcome to Ryuji.
Hello. How's everyone doing today? You good? Okay, so I was thinking about what to say today. There are a lot of people here in the crowd and people behind me who have a lot more experience and who spent a lot more time in the animal rights world than I have. And so I was like, what can I do to hopefully bring a little bit of value to you? And I think what I'll do is there anyone here who's kind of like somewhat new to the animal rights movement? Like you've been in it for like a year, like maybe like 2 years, like or less than that? Like some people? Cool. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for coming. And I thought what I'd do is I tell you a little bit about my story, and I thought what I'd do maybe is I wanted to do something that would help me, like maybe 3 years ago when I was first starting out. And so what I thought I'd do is I'll tell you a little bit about my story and then go into a few embarrassing experiences that I've had, and hopefully it's gonna be a little bit fun. So anyways, it was in 2015 that I first read a book called Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. And it's a great book, history book that I recommend to everyone. But around page 300 of that book, there was, I'm not using the mic properly. Okay, so around page 300 of this book, there was a little section about animal agriculture and about the standard legal practices of the meat, dairy, and egg industries. And it was the first time I ever learned about this, and it shocked me because what I learned is that these animals that are used for the products that I loved so much suffered, and suffered so much more than I could have ever imagined. Now, after I read that, I went on a deep dive. I went down this rabbit hole that probably a lot of you relate to, where you look up every single industry that uses animals, and you find out that it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And the more you look into it, the more you realize that animals suffer so much more than you could have even imagined. And you're like, I don't even think I can relate to the suffering that these animals endure at the hands of humans. And so right then, I felt this calling where I felt like this is a problem that I want to spend my life trying to solve. I felt this calling that I really want to help these animals, and if there's one thing I can do with my life, I hope that by the time I die, the world is a little bit better for animals, at least. Now, that was in 2015. But the thing is that after that, for 2.5 years, I did nothing. I would wake up every single day, and this problem would be on my mind. I would think about the suffering that these animals are enduring. I would feel it, and yet every single day I would feel powerless. I did nothing. I would sit on my ass. I was in college at the time, so I would go to class, come back, do my homework, go to bed. And all the while, this was in the back of my mind, but I couldn't do anything. And I think it was for two, maybe like 3 reasons. One is I felt powerless. I was like, what is a guy like me gonna do about this? I'm just this little college kid. Like, how can I do anything to change the world? I had trouble making friends back then, so I was like, how can I convince anyone to do anything differently that's gonna make the world better and solve such a big problem? And the second thing is, I didn't know where to start. I didn't realize that there was an animal rights community like this who did things and who fought really hard to make the world better for animals. And the third thing is, to be honest with you, is that when I first got into this world and I wanted to do something about it, I would look at like blogs and YouTube videos, and I would look at the people who seemed to me like leading the movements. And at the time, me being an Asian person, I didn't see anyone who looked like me up there. And so I was like, it didn't feel to me like there was a place for me in the movement. Anyways, that was like 2.5 years of my life where I remember every single day I would wake up, I would think about it, but do nothing. And then finally, one day I was like, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm gonna start somewhere. And so I went to my first ever animal rights event. Now I remember I was so nervous back then. It was a vigil. Now for people who don't know what a vigil is, it's basically an event where you show up in front of a slaughterhouse and you bear witness to the animals who are going into the slaughterhouse. Now it was in Los Angeles, and at that one in particular, we were able to give water to the pigs, which is really great because they've been on these trucks for sometimes days at a time with no food and no water. And I remember I was so nervous to go there. Not only I was going to a slaughterhouse, which is a very intimidating place to go, I didn't know anyone there. And so I remember I pulled up and I didn't know like the designated parking space, which I still blame on the organizers because they didn't tell us. And I pulled up at like the McDonald's that was a 5-minute walk away from the slaughterhouse, and I parked there. And I remember just sitting there for about 5 minutes being like, should I go or should I go home? Because I felt so nervous to go, and I almost went home. But the reason I didn't was because I was like, well, I drove here, it was like 45 minutes. I might as well at least check it out. I wasn't even sure like where we were supposed to meet, but somehow I stumbled out of my car, I walked towards the thing, my heart was like beating so fast, and I met someone else on the way there who was also going there, so you know, that was really helpful. And then I finally made it there. But I'm so glad I did, because that absolutely changed my life. I think the one thing that really helped me more than anything in my journey was finding community. That when I went to that event, I met people who then introduced me to more people, who introduced me to more events. 2 weeks later, I, on a whim basically, went to the Animal Liberation Conference in Berkeley, California, and I met more people that I could have ever imagined existed that are fighting for this cause. And that's the thing that really changed me. I realized I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who feels like this is such a huge problem that needs solving, and I'm not the only one who desperately wants to do something about it. In fact, there are thousands, tens of thousands, I don't know how many people, but countless people in the world who have the same vision as you, who want to make a difference. And that really empowered me to get out there. And so the message of this is, I guess, you know, you're here today at the Animal Rights March. Okay. We're here today at the Animal Rights March, and I think one of the biggest opportunities for a lot of you here would be to meet other people, especially if you're new. Make an effort to meet a new person, say hi. For me, it's something that's really difficult to do. Like, I'm very introverted, so I'll tell you a couple stories about that in a second. But basically, like, it's pretty hard for me to do, but I think it's really, really worth it, because if you have community, that, in my opinion, in my experience, is what's going to give you longevity in this movement. That's going to make it so that in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, you're still going to be fighting for this cause, and I think that that's what we need, because this is a team effort at the end of the day. I can't do this alone, none of us can do this alone. We have to work together in order to make this happen. So you have my permission, say hi to someone new today, and hopefully you'll do it. Hi, what's up? But yeah, I just want to tell you a couple stories about, so this is like kind of a funny story. So when I first started out, it was, my whole thing was, because I realized this, I was like, I want to meet new people. I desperately want to meet new people. And so I looked up all these vegan and animal rights events around where I was. And there was this meetup, I think